Hi everyone, this is Gwen from Nile. Nile is a serverless Postgres built for modern SaaS applications. Now, everyone knows the most important thing about SaaS is, well, the customers, or as we sometimes call them, tenants. Tenants are a very important concept when building SaaS, and as such, they're also a very important concept in Nile. Nile provides built-in tenant virtualization. So let me show you what I mean here. First of all, we need to sign up to Nile. And once we did that, we want to create a workspace and a database. I'm going to go with the default name here because they're cute. And ta-da! We have a database. And that's kind of the nice thing about serverless, right? You click and you have a database and you don't have to worry about so many details around it. Now, note that the database was created with this table already in it. You see the tenants table? This is what we call in Nile built-in tables. And because tenants are such an important concept to every SaaS business and to Nile, we're providing a table with some columns that we're guessing you're going to use, like name. You can also add your own columns. And Nile also have few other built-in tables for other things you may do in your SaaS applications, other SaaS features. So if you go to our docs, you can learn all about those other things. Now, nice thing to have a built-in table, but in order to build my application, I need to create my own table too. So let me add a to-do list table because I'm building a to-do list app. Very original, I know. So here's my table schema. And do you see the tenant ID column in the table? We at Nile, we call those tables with tenant ID column tenant-aware tables. Tenant without this column, they're called shared tables. This gives you a hint what we do with them, right? And this is a normal column, but in a sec I'll show you how Nile uses it to provide tenant isolation, which is a very important feature. So we got a schema. Yay! Now let's get some data in. So I'm going to start with creating our first tenant, and this is just an insert to the tenants table. Do note that you get an auto-generated random UUID as a tenant ID, and this adds tiny bit of security. Nobody can, mess around and try to guess the ID of your next tenant. And now we're going to add a to-do item for this tenant. So generally speaking, I would have had to type in the tenant ID here, but Nile has this nice feature that lets me copy paste the tenant ID from this drop-down list, so I'm going to use that. Now let's check the result, and as you can see, we have a first task for our first tenant. Now, in order to demonstrate tenant isolation, I'm going to have to create another tenant and another task, and I'm going to speed through it. And let's see the results. As expected, I can see two tasks, each belongs to the two tenants that I just created. This is great, just what I wanted. And this is great because right now I'm just a developer messing around with some test data. But if this is an application in production, obviously there is some risk here, right? As we all know, the second rule of SaaS is to never let any customer see any data that belongs to someone else. The first rule is to have customers first. So if a customer can see data for another customer, this is really not good. What do? Let me show you. In Nile, we use tenant context. So we set a context to a specific tenant, and after we do that, all the queries in this context are going to only return data that belong to this tenant. And this works for selects, updates, deletes, what have you. So when we're writing our SaaS application, all we have to do is make sure that our context is set, and then we don't have to worry about data accidentally leaking in any of our queries. And in addition, our queries look a bit cleaner and nicer as well. A good way to think about tenant context is to think that the moment you set a tenant context, It's like stepping into a virtual database dedicated for that specific tenant. And once you connect to that virtual private database for the tenant, this database only includes data for this tenant and, well, some shared data too, but that's a different story. And this means that you cannot touch or see anyone else's data. It protects you from having accidents and making mistakes. Even while developing some of the tutorials, this saved me from making a lot of mistakes in my own code. So it was really useful. So enough talking. Let me run the query with the tenant context. You can see that I'm setting the context to the second tenant. And as you can see, I'm running the exact same queries that I did before that used to return 2 tasks. Now I'm getting results just for this one tenant. So here it goes. It all works. So let's wrap up. In this short-ish video, I showed you Nile built-in tables. So you learn about those. You learned about tenant-aware tables. And you learn about tenant isolation and the idea of virtual private tenant databases. If you want to learn more about any of those concepts or see more code examples, you can go to our documentation and you'll find everything you need there. Also, you can check out our GitHub with the examples and the code. And if you have any questions, if you want to discuss, argue, shoot the breeze, please join our community Discord or open a discussion on our GitHub. We're there. We would love to talk about our favorite subject, Nile and tenants. Thank you so much, and I hope you're going to build a very successful SaaS with Nile.